Hey everybody, this is Andre here with the Kevin Breeze channel, and in this video, we're going to be doing a comparison between the BLU G91 and the Motorola Moto G Play. Let's get started. So the BLU G91 has a 6.5-inch LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 91%. We got a really nice looking hole punch front facing camera right here, and this camera is 16 megapixels. The Moto G Play has a 6.5-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 80.6%. So actually, surprisingly, these phones have the exact same size display, and pretty much everything about these displays is going to be the same. The only real difference is more in the appearance of the design. The Moto G Play has a water drop notch here for the front-facing camera. This camera is 5 megapixels, and I think the BLU G91's front-facing camera looks a lot better. I'm not a big fan of the water drop notch because it's just this little blob extending from the bezel right in the middle of the status bar, and it doesn't look as clean, whereas with the hole punch camera, it's off to the side here and it's really nice. There's no extra part of the bezel or anything like that. It's just the camera sitting right there. And I think that it looks a lot nicer. In addition to that, the BLU G91 has one of the highest screen to body ratios I've seen, with a screen to body ratio of 91%. These bezels are so thin compared to the Moto G Play with an 80.6% screen to body ratio. You can definitely tell the bezels on the Moto G Play are quite a bit thicker. In terms of overall design, they are really similar. But again, I would say the BLU G91 is a little bit thinner and just looks nicer overall. Now the BLU G91 has 128 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD expansion, and the Moto G Play has 32 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD expansion as well. Now the BLU G91 clearly has the advantage here. 32 gigabytes is really not a whole lot of space. In fact, it's below what I would consider a minimum. With 32 gigabytes, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot because the system already takes up so much space. The basic necessities as far as apps go take up a little bit more, and then you're going to be left with pretty much nothing. To give you an idea of what this all looks like, right now the BLU G91 has 13.59 gigabytes on it, taking up 11% of the storage, whereas the Moto G Play has 19.13 gigabytes on it, taking up 60% of the storage. Now this is a huge difference. You can see right here, the system is taking up 14 gigabytes of space on the Moto G Play, and that is almost half of the storage of the phone, whereas everything that's on the BLU G91 right now is taking up such a tiny percent. You're going to have a lot more room to do other things. Now, both of these phones do have microSD card expansion, but it is also important to realize you can't run apps from that, and it is a little bit of a hassle to have to deal with that anyway. So having your internal storage on the phone, if possible, is really preferred. And it's really nice with the BLU G91. You should be able to do that no problem unless you have a ton of photos and videos or a lot of larger apps. Now, neither of these phones have wireless charging, but both of them have a fingerprint scanner and face unlock. So that's really nice to have both options. Definitely makes things a lot easier. We're going to test out these fingerprint scanners and see how they work. Starting with the BLU G91. Let's see what this can do. And that was really fast. One more time. Let's try out the Moto G Play. So those were both extremely easy to use. I had no problems at all. I really do like this location. It's a pretty classic location. Now there are some with fingerprint scanners on the display that I think looks a lot cooler, and some that have the fingerprint scanner on the power button that's more practical. But having that little spot right here for the fingerprint scanner is still really good. There's nothing wrong with that. So I really have no complaints about either of these phones as far as that goes. Now let's take a look at these camera setups here. We got the BLU G91 with a 16 megapixel rear camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. So this phone really has pretty much everything you could really ask for in a phone camera, both an ultra wide and a macro camera, all those kinds of features, so that's really nice. Meanwhile, the Moto G Play has a 13 megapixel rear camera and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera, so not quite as good. It doesn't really have any extra features. So that is something to keep in mind if you are one of those people who really does like to use the camera and likes all those different features, then the BLU G91 might be a better choice for you because the Moto G Play has a more basic camera that doesn't have as many features. So these pictures were taken by the cameras of each phone. As you can see, this one was taken by the BLU G91 and this one was taken by the Moto G Play. They really look almost the same as far as the quality and everything goes. I think the colors on the BLU G91's photo are a little bit more vivid than that of the Moto G Play. And since they're so similar, the big edge would come from the features, which the BLU G91 has a lot more of. So I'm gonna go ahead and say, for the purpose of the camera, the BLU G91 does have an advantage. It has an ultra wide and a macro camera, whereas the Moto G Play has neither of those. And in video mode, it's gonna be largely the same. Both of these phones can shoot in 1080p as their max quality in both cameras. So the difference that you saw between those two photos is gonna be the same, and the quality and the difference between the videos, which is really not much. So either of these phones is gonna have a pretty good camera that you can use for a lot of different purposes, but the BLU G91 is just gonna have a lot more features as far as that goes. Now internally, the BLU G91 is getting 4 gigabytes of RAM with the MediaTek Helio A25 processor, and the Moto G Play is getting 3 gigabytes of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 460 processor. We ran Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and the BLU G91 came back with a single core score of 140 and a multi-core score of 861, and the Moto G Play came back with a single core score of 219 and a multi-core score of 1058. So the Moto G Play is a little bit faster than the BLU G91, not by a whole lot, but still a noticeable amount. Both of these phones are definitely going to be suitable for everyday use. If you're browsing the web, consuming content, going on social media, maybe a few games that don't have complex graphics, photo editing should be okay. Definitely wouldn't try to do too high-end of activities on these phones, but everything else should be good. The only real difference is the Moto G Play is going to do those things a little bit faster and a little bit smoother, whereas the BLU G91 might be a little slower from time to time. As far as the battery goes, these phones actually have pretty much the same battery. They have 5,000 milliamp hour batteries, which are really good batteries. Basically, the largest battery you can get. So definitely a good choice as far as battery life goes. If you're on the go a lot and don't actually get to plug your phone in all the time, but still have to use it throughout the day, then it's great to have a phone with such a big battery. Especially between these phones, neither of them is half bad as far as processing power goes. The other thing is the longevity down the road. When the phone starts to wear out, the battery is still going to last a little bit longer just because it's so big. The only real difference between these two phones is the Moto G Play supports 10 watt fast charging and the BLU G91 doesn't. But that's really only going to matter if you have a fast charger. Otherwise, it's a pretty irrelevant thing. But just know that if you do have a fast charger, you'll be able to charge the Moto G Play a little bit faster. Now, in conclusion, which of these phones is better? Despite the difference in the processing power in favor of the Moto G Play, I would say the BLU G91 is the better device. This is because although almost everything is the same and the Moto G Play has a tiny bit more processing power than the BLU G91, I would still give the edge to the camera of the BLU G91 because of all the features it has that the Moto G Play doesn't, as well as slightly better quality in the camera. Not enough to make a difference in and of itself, but adding on to everything else, I do think it is something that does make a little bit of a difference. In addition to that, this is the big tipping point that really told me the BLU G91 is the better device between these two. The BLU G91 has 128 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, whereas the Moto G Play, even though it still has microSD card expansion, only has 32 gigabytes of internal storage. And in this day and age, with apps in the system and everything getting larger and larger, having quadruple the storage is definitely a deal breaker, especially when most of the other specs are basically the same. I think that even though the BLU G91 doesn't have quite the best processor out of a lot of phones in its range, I do think that 128 gigabytes of internal storage more than makes up for it. It's really hard to find that much internal storage in a phone at this price level, so that is definitely noteworthy. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe. If you want to learn more about the phones themselves, be sure to watch the full reviews of them on the channel. And if you want more info on pricing and availability, that stuff is always changing, so definitely check the link in the description. But otherwise, I will see you guys in the next video.